So, Mario, welcome to Champions of Sustainable Development podcast. And at the outset, very uh, grateful that you're taking time off to do this with us. So, really appreciate that. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and it's a pleasure having worked with you over the last 20 years, I would say. Huh?
Yes, more than 20 years.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
interacted first when we did the first green building conference in the Middle East, you remember, in Al Bustan Rotana Hotel in March
Yeah, and
2003. That was
you
our
were
first
working
interaction.
for National Bank of Dubai at that time, right?
I was working for Emirates Bank, Tricolor
Emirates.
Initiatives
Yeah,
at that
yeah,
time.
I remember.
Yeah, so since then we have been on and off working with each other over the last 20 years and more. Uh, the as I mentioned to you earlier, the objective of this podcast is to humanize the whole sustainable development concept because in my experience, I see there's a lot of focus on technology, a lot of focus on finance, but there's hardly any focus on the people who are actually making these changes happen. And I think that is very understated because ultimately, if those champions were not there, the sustainable development movement would never have happened. And I think we have been living in very interesting times, particularly since between the decades of 80s through the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s, when the drastic change or transformation happened from business as usual to actually talking of green buildings, climate change, carbon footprint, and all that kind of stuff. So it's been very exciting, and I've seen a lot of transition myself, and I'm sure you have been witness to that as well. So we want to draw on your experience and learn from there so that people who are starting out their careers, who are budding engineers, who have not seen those early struggle days, to understand what it makes to be a champion in sustainable development and learn from you. So again, thank you. So let's get rolling. I want to start with from the very beginning. What's your background? Where were you born? Which year was it? And what kind of the social structure or economic condition was there, so that people get an understanding of where your origins are.
So I was born in 1953, June, and born to a middle class family, and preceding before me were three girls, and my father and mother wanted a boy, so very traditionally, very Asian in their thinking, they wanted a son,
Right.
and lo and behold, this little boy was born. And one of the things, even though my parents were ardent Catholics or Christians, they went and what shall I say, went to a palm reader or a fortune teller, and the fortune teller told. I don't know why they did that, but the fortune teller had told my father that this guy will be his career will be related to the earth, something to do with
Oh,
the earth, right? So, and
really?
my father used to tell me this. Probably that would have brainwashed me to do things related to the earth, right? Earth meaning the world, right?
Right.
And then normal life with three sisters growing, three sisters and me being the youngest. My father used to work for a shell company, a petroleum company, and he was not an engineer, but he had to do technical stuff because he was marketing petrol and lubricating oils. And I still have some of his books from shell company talking about the internal combustion engine. And this was the reading
Oh,
which I did as a young boy, not reading the text, but looking at the pictures and understanding how an
right.
engine works and so on. And so that was the start of, you could say the nucleus of my interest in engineering and being associated with the world concepts of as it pertains. Okay.
So you were
And
quite
then,
a immediate big family, right, with three sisters and two parents. So
yes,
who was the one who was influencing you most at that age?
I think at the early years it was my mother. because of being a son, and when you're the only boy, you tend to get
Yes.
preferential treatment, especially in the Asian region. And yeah, I think I got some preferential treatment. And there's always a rift between the three girls and myself. And but they were very loving three sisters. And so I think it was the earlier, still till I went to school. I think it would have been my mom, teaching us various concepts of life. But then after that, I recall my dad having a profound, what should I say, interest in my well-being, as well as I followed him because I think he taught me the earlier parts of life and engineering, I would say. Okay.
And was your father also an engineer by
No, he was
qualification?
not an engineer, but he, as I said, he was working for Shell Company, marketing petrol, lubricants, brake oils, and he used to go around the country looking at petrol stations, and when you come to a petrol station, there is pumps and electrics and
Right.
hoists to lift the car up and compressors and so and as we all know, this was a very regulated industry. Everything was done to high safety standards, longevity in mind. I mean, when you lay a pipe, it was not for one day, not for 1 month, but for 25 years. So he used to go and do the inspections and so on. So there was from my younger days, there was this affiliation with things that move and things that perform. You can see them performing.
All right. Now, you mentioned, being born in a middle class family. Would it be safe to say that in those days in the South Asian region, pretty much most of the families used to be middle class because of the overall economic condition, just coming out of, pre-independence, forming their own countries, getting the act together, etc.
I wouldn't say that, and I think Sri Lanka particularly has a disproportionate middle class and a affluent class to the general masses. Even today, a couple of years ago, we had these riots in the country, or what they call an Aragali, an uprising, and with that we managed to break a 74-year tradition. And that's because I think about 90% of the people, I wouldn't say they are living in poverty, but they are a different social, as well as, what should I say, they're earning power. I'm talking before the Middle East boom and before the influence of people going abroad and sending money.
Absolutely.
So before that, I think it was basically not a developed country. It was not. It was farming and agriculture and school education. Some things like that. So the middle class is not the dominant class. I think it was a minority, very very small minority. Okay, even though
Oh,
it's
well,
called middle, I think it was. I think it will be middle income type of.
middle income, correct.
Yeah.
But I remember, the way I was born, obviously in 1970, and the growing up in the 70s and 80s were very different from growing up in the 90s and 2000s.
Absolutely.
For me, whenever we talk of sustainable development, we obviously talk of the three pillars of sustainability. And from my childhood days, I remember the social side of sustainable development and the environmental side of sustainable development were very predominant and was a way of life, by default. Everything we would do would be, because we were again in from the middle class, everything would, all resources need to be optimized, lights had to be
Yeah,
switched off, so on and so forth.
true. I mean, when you look at even yes, I think the toys we had. Obviously, I used to get
Yes.
the occasional battery car, which used to move a few doors
Yeah.
and things like that. But the toys I remember were a milk can with
Ah,
a rod in
string.
between, and I used to
Okay.
pull this around the yard, right? Again, something
Yeah.
to do with motion. And then we had a
Yes.
bicycle rim which we used to take it with a stick around.
Yeah.
So I think Sri Lanka, even though we got independence in 1948 and I was born in 53, so 5 years, say, for 58 and so. so on. I don't think we had, remote controlled toys and,
Of course,
anything, walking dolls or, things like that at that time. If there were those things, there would have been somebody who had gone to England and brought some toys, right?
correct, correct.
So we were still growing up as a nation at that time. I had a Hornby train set, but not a electric one. One used to wind, and it was
Correct,
like
correct, correct. Yeah,
so.
winding
I did,
toys.
yeah, and I had dinky toys. My father used to buy me these little dinky toys, which again, things which moved fascinated me from my younger days.
And the most important thing that I remember from my childhood days was the fact that we used to have this guidelines from parents that uh, 4 o'clock was the time when you could go out and play with your friends of the neighborhood. So we used to every neighborhood has it was like a community. There used to be playing fields, and you met friends from all over the place within the community, obviously. And 4 o'clock was the time when you were allowed to go out. So you'd get ready, go
Yes.
out with a football, cricket bat, depending on the season. So that was a huge, community activity, which I thought was a fantastic pillar of sustainable development, and which has gone completely missing from today's generation.
Yes, we used to live in a, now of course that whole area has been built up, with houses and
Mm.
commercial establishments. But we had a lot of playgrounds, purpose-made playgrounds, and ironically, this group of I was the youngest in that whole community of cricket players. So I used to, my job was running around collecting the ball. Rather, I don't think I got a chance of batting or bowling. But this group still is probably in their 80s or 90s, and they we keep in touch. And they are some of them are engineers, some of them are politicians, some of them are doctors. Most of them have passed away, but this group, you're right, this cricket
Mm.
group, we couldn't play football and rugby and things like that. I mean,
Mm.
for obvious financial reasons, we didn't have the jerseys. And cricket, you could play with a bat and a stick, and a
Right.
tennis ball. So yes, this group is there, and we used to gather every day to play cricket, rain, hail, or thunder. We used to play cricket, and that was a good interaction of people and different cultures, uh,
Absolutely, yes.
and different interests in life,
Mm.
and they were good, good times, good times.
But that's gone completely missing from this generation. And do you see a negative impact on the current generation because of the lack of that community involvement?
I think so. I think so. But I don't want to comment too much on that because I'm not. I see people now I live in a village environment here. I do see people playing basketball and cricket on the road and all
Mm.
that. But I don't see there are probably 10 or 15 boys and girls cycling around, and it's there here. I'm not sure about Colombo because Colombo is a
Correct.
different environment. Here I live close to the airport in Colombo, which is actually about 50 kilometers from Colombo. And here you see people playing cricket, and if there's an open area of
Mm.
land, they'll be running around and playing badminton, cricket, things like that. So I wouldn't say that it has gone away, but you're right. It is a exception rather than the norm. Okay.
I think that's the exception is in the the smaller towns where the lifestyle perhaps remains still the good old way. But the bigger metropolis like Dubai, for example, it's very difficult to find that. Also, there are a lot of community parks here, and I see a lot of people gathering there. But I'm not sure whether you're actually building friendships from
Yeah.
that age which last your lifetime. The way you
Yes.
mentioned that your friends are still there and get in touch. So from there, let's come to your schooling days. Which school did you go to? What kind of curriculum did you have?
So, so I went to a school called St. Joseph's College. We obviously think we are the best school in Colombo or Sri Lanka.
Oh,
It's a Christian or Roman Catholic school. It's in Colombo, and it's one of the oldest. So there are a couple of old schools in Sri Lanka, Royal St. Thomas's. St. Benedict, St. Peter's, St. Joseph's,
Right.
Ananda, Nalanda. So there are a couple of key schools in St. Joseph's. As much as I like to say it was number one, there are probably others competing for that
Right. Right.
position. And it was a Roman Catholic education, not a government school at that time. I think even now it's a private school. It was one of the largest schools, definitely. We are the only school at that time which had a swimming pool, an Olympic size swimming pool.
Swimming pool in those
Yeah,
days.
yeah. These are the one. This
Wow.
we were and St. Thomas's had a smaller pool. St. Thomas's was out in the not. It was about 8 kilometers away from Colombo. So
Mm.
so these are the only two schools which had swimming pools.
Wow.
And it was a good school. And I believe we were started in the English medium, and then in somewhere in the early 60s, they said that this is where the country took a step in a different direction to make Sinhalese
Mm.
the national language. And we were,
Right.
I would say forced, but we had to follow the Sinhalese class. All our teachings were in Sinhalese. And actually, at that time, the Sinhalese teaching was just starting, things like physics, chemistry, mathematics.
Oh, okay.
They were just starting the Sinhalese curriculum. And we would say we were the guinea pigs. And so I went to St. Joseph's, tried to do sports, but I was not very successful in getting. I did play for the under 11 college, class team.
Right.
But some of my classmates who used to sit in the same row, they proceeded to be captain the cricket team, the main cricket team, the rugby team. So my classmates were more athletic, more sports oriented. But I still didn't want to study. I was still fooling around and getting detained in class, getting whacked by the principal for fighting in school, for shouting, laughing, and so I my up till about the up till the time I got married, which was about 5 years later, I didn't take life seriously,
Okay.
and so I was basically a bad student, I would say, yeah, at St. Joseph's.
So in Sri Lanka, did you have the practice of teachers beating up kids because of as
Yeah.
punishment?
We used to get beat up very much, right? We used to get. I remember we had a teacher who used to pull us from our collar and pull us over the table,
Oh
right?
my God.
So I mean, with the best of intentions, it was not malicious.
Right.
And
Right.
when the teacher couldn't deal with us, we were sent to the principal, and he used to have a public canings, or he would come to class and cane us in front of all
Right.
our
Right.
peers. And it used to hurt, but that was life. I've got caned a couple of times,
Mm. That
and
sounds very similar to what we used to have in India as well at that time. But I guess that would be a punishable offense in today's date.
yeah. That's another change in the way things happen.
Mm.
And we used to get slapped, across
Mm.
our face if we retaliated to being punished or said the unwanted words. So it was and again it was a Roman Catholic school.
Mm.
So we were not governed by the government. What shall I
In fact,
say?
that's another commonality I discover now because I also went to a school called St. Joseph's College in grade 11 and 12 in
Yeah.
Calcutta. But that was run by those Irish Christian brothers.
Yes.
It had the Indian curriculum. We used to call it the ICC curriculum, but the Christian brothers used to run it. And honestly, that was a huge exposure coming from my background of a Bengali middle class. Where till
Yeah.
grade 10, I was like going to a English medium school, but that was everything was in Bengali in that school because it was in a
Yes.
like suburbs. But then when I shifted to this school, it was suddenly a different ballgame altogether. And Christian brothers, and I was in awe of them. They're so disciplined, so professional, so well
Yes.
dressed in their white cloaks. So very
Yes.
impressive.
Absolutely.
So St. Joseph.
And I was at St. Joseph's till the GC O levels, and my father's best friend was a principal of a school, right?
Oh, okay.
So, so he used to keep an eye on me during my off off days of school, and he told my
Mhm.
father, "This guy is, playing the fool. Don't let him do his O levels this year because he will fail, and when he fails, he's not gonna make the attempt to pass. So don't let him
Right.
sit the O levels. Let him wait back in the O level class and study again, and then do the O levels again, right?"
Yes. So
So I
what
stayed
subjects did
back
you take
1 year.
in?
Sorry.
So what subjects did you take in your high school?
For O levels, I took physics, chemistry, mathematics, applied mathematics, Sinhalese, English, religious knowledge, economics, things like that. So I waited. So I normally O level is 2 years. I stayed at three. I stayed 3 years and did the O levels and passed. Ironically, even though I passed, I failed my Sinhala, right? So which meant that technically I didn't pass the O levels because the Sinhalese was a mandatory subject to pass.
Right. Right.
And at that stage, my father used to play bridge with the founder of one of the biggest schools now called Ananda College.
Okay.
And it was Dr. P.D.S. Kularatne, a nationalist education professor. So he founded Ananda College, and my father used to play bridge with him.
Oh,
And the Ananda College was rated as the best uh, government school in the country, and everybody's dream was to get their children to go to Ananda. And my father, being a good friend of the founder of the school, told, "I want
mm.
my son to go to Ananda," and he, the bridge. There's a piece of paper you write the bridge notes on. He wrote a note
Yeah.
on this and told me, "Go and meet the principal of Ananda," which I did the next day. And I
Right.
got into Ananda without any payments or any qualifications or anything. I got into Ananda to do my A
Really?
levels. Yeah. So
Okay.
I moved from St. Joseph's to Ananda, like pretty much what you were doing in my last 2 years of high school or pre-university. I went to Ananda to do my A levels, right?
Okay.
So that was a change in discipline, and Ananda was the students are not disciplined the way St. Joseph used to discipline them, right? I don't
Right.
think there was caning and being sent on a 6 rounds around the ground or something like that. Uh,
Okay.
so so Ananda was a different ball game altogether.
So how many years is A levels?
2 years.
2 years. But that's not engineering, right? It's like grade
No,
11,
no, that
12 kind of.
is not even pre-engineering. Anybody who wants to get into medical school, anybody who
Right.
wants to get into university has to do A levels, right?
Right. Right. So depending on your performance in the A levels, then you get to go to the
Yes,
university and you get to
yeah.
choose. Right.
So funny enough, before I did my A levels,
Mhm.
I entered. At that time, the university was starting a non-degree program in Sri Lanka
Okay.
for the first time. So the qualifications were you had to be interested in getting into this, that you had to have some kind of aptitude. And also you had to have a distinction in mathematics and credits in physics, chemistry, and so on. So those are the entry requirements. And I managed to get into in a university to do a non-degree program called a diploma in engineering.
Right.
So I
Okay.
actually didn't finish my A levels, but I managed to get into to the university, not a degree program, a diploma program.
We often talk about the education system being broken and it's not being perfect, and why are we studying subjects that we never use in life? Are you of the same opinion as well, or do you find that some things you studied in school are still useful?
I I think it's an overall, like when you're young, when you're a when you're a schoolboy or when you're in your formative years, you don't know a lot of things, right? I mean, like economics, right?
Right.
You don't know these things. And I think that those subjects give you an overall understanding of life and the
Right.
scientific or the industrial world, right? For example, when you do applied mathematics, right, relative velocity,
Mm.
right, so the word relative is drummed into you during that time, right? And then
Right.
everything is relative in this world, right? So
Mm.
everything is in relation to something else. So,
Correct. Correct.
as much as I didn't dislike subjects like singular, right? I still am not very good in writing singular and reading singular, but I should have done singular, right? And today, 50 years after I left Sri Lanka, come back to Sri Lanka,
Mm.
I think I'm a misfit where the Sri Lanka Sinhalese is concerned. So I think
Right.
everything you learn it goes to getting this huge amount of information or knowledge into your system, and I don't think it's a wrong thing to learn. And
Mm.
when I was studying in the U.S., I used to have people who did a master's degree in medicine in health science, and then
Right.
came to do engineering, right?
Mm.
So there would have been a connection, or there would have been, there were people who were from the arts doing engineering and people from engineering doing arts. And even now that broad spectrum of knowledge is appreciated in many hiring agencies,
Right. Right. So I guess the way to look at this education system would be to the system that actually makes you ready for the world. With because
Absolutely,
if you
absolutely, absolutely. And even when we got into this diploma course in the university, we had social sciences in it, which at that time, the last thing when you're trying to get past doing
yes, yes.
engineering and physics, and which is already very tough subjects to learn about,
Mm.
why the farmer's life is going down the tubes. You know what I mean.
Right.
So
In
as a
fact,
result of it,
yeah, yeah,
I think it's
absolutely.
it's a global rounding off of your outlook in life is created.
Correct, correct. Yeah, I think that's it's always about the perspective, right? So if you get your
Now
perspective
I
right, then you.
appreciate it. If you ask me 50 years ago, or not 50, 65 years ago,
Hmm.
or 60 years ago, I would have said, what nonsense. But now I appreciate it.
Yes, I think it's important in life to grow old. When you mature, maturity
Yes,
comes with age, and then you realize what the real value of things are.
yes,
And as we always say, little learning is a dangerous thing. So when you're young,
absolutely.
then
And
you
and
know
and
everything.
that's something which I think is you were talking about our education system, and nowadays education system, the playing cricket as a community versus not doing it. I think that is
Mm.
something which is lacking in the hands-on experience, and the in-depth subject knowledge. I think is lacking in certain parts of our life now. Okay. And it's because if those days we had to fight to get the information, right? We had to,
Mm.
information are not readily available. Today, information is, freely available. In those days, you had to go to a doctor to find out what the body temperature and why it's escalating or why
Yeah.
it's whereas today you have it on the, on your at your palm.
Fingertip. Yeah, absolutely. But again, today's world, I think, is a more the other challenge that has arisen is the concept of misinformation or wrong
Yes,
information. To even understand what is actually correct or factually true is a challenge now. So
yes,
anyway, that's a different subject altogether, and I think we can have a long discussion on that. So
absolutely.
so diploma. Tell us a little bit about your diploma experience and what excited you there. What were your lasting impressions from there? What
Oh,
influenced
so
you most?
so first of all, the impression, I went to this university, and I was a Colombo College kid. Okay,
Hmm.
I was from Colombo, right?
Right.
And in the university, because of this system of hiring from across the country, we were the chosen ones to be, I wouldn't say tortured, but tormented, under the scenario called ragging. Okay, I think it's still
Oh,
a, yeah. So we were ragged, right? And being Columbus
mm,
School students, we were
yes,
ragged. And I remember one of my guys from St. Thomas's College. His father was a lecturer at
right.
at the university, very prominent electronics engineer,
Mm,
and he was lecturing at the university. And this guy got the double dose because people are taking vengeance for what his father was doing. So the ragging was so bad that they closed the university down for a couple of days.
oh, wow.
And so that was the start of being introduced to the from a very safe
Mm.
environment at home to a sort of a, I wouldn't say hostile, but a different environment, right?
First test of the
So
real world.
yes, but then you also graduate from this homework type of thing to a performance
Mm,
type of education,
right,
and to learn what you like to learn rather than what you have to learn.
correct.
And then the dress codes, there were no dress codes. Nobody cared whether you sat in the front of the class or the back of the class.
Mm,
Yeah, right. So all these new things, that is the better part of that university education. And
right.
I joined a group called the Mechanical Auto Group, which was again to do with cars, right? Again, my background about cars
Mm,
and IC engines and
mm,
all those fascinating stuff. I,
right,
I
right.
enjoy I enjoy the 2 years of academic education, the program there, and it made also appreciate made to appreciate that professors were there,
Mm.
and again we were the guinea pigs of moving from the imperial system to the metric system.
Oh, that
So,
transition happened at that time.
yeah, that happened in the early 70s.
Okay.
So that was another change, like what is a kilonewton, right? I still don't know what a kilonewton is, right? So we learned a lot at that time, and did a lot of practical stuff, measuring water flows and pressures and temperatures and all that kind of stuff. Good engineering background. I'm happy that I went to that diploma course,
Mm.
and I'm happy that I followed that course. Okay, so that was a 2-year academic
Right.
program. The third year to be in the industry. Okay, so
Okay.
you have to go and work in the industry. Okay,
And
so
that
so
industry, so do you, at the end of this 2 years, you get a diploma certificate in
yeah,
engineering.
end of 3 years, you
That
get a
is part of
diploma.
the industrial experience. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And during the university, during this period, it was university. It was from the University of Moratuwa, University of Sri Lanka Moratuwa campus. It's still there. It's one of the biggest universities today, and
mm,
of course, it is not the cream. It is not considered the cream, because the cream of
yeah.
the universities is called the University of Sri Lanka Peradeniya. Peradeniya is up in the mountains. So that is,
Oh,
everybody who goes to university in Peradeniya thinks that they are better students than the ones in Colombo. Uh, the third year, but during the 2 years, both years, I did
mm,
something which was unique. I went for a job to did what they call a vacation training in
right.
in in a hotel industry. So that was also a major milestone in my theoretical and practical education, where during the vacation period from October, November, December of
Right.
1972, I went to work at the Colombo Intercontinental Hotel, which had just been built.
Right. Right.
I was a vacation trainee, right?
Hmm.
And my job was to run around the place, understand what a valve was, what a expansion valve was, what a globe valve was, what a throttling valve was, what a plug valve
Hmm.
was, or and the large centrifugal chillers which you and I used to be very
Hmm.
familiar with. I used to work on the starting of chillers, and as a trainee, I'm not in the responsibility role
Right. Right. Right.
in 1972 at the Colombo Intercontinental, which was the first five-star hotel to be built in Sri Lanka
Okay.
by International Bechtel, which is one of the largest engineering organizations in the world, and Colombo Commercial Company, which was at that time the biggest engineering company in Sri Lanka. So, I learned 3 months of HVAC, what an air handler was, what a pump is, what a generator was, right? Because in
Hmm.
university you hear these phrases, but
Absolutely.
you don't know, what is a 200 kVA generator? What is it? Is
Hmm.
it 6 inches long or is it 6 feet long, right?
Correct. Correct. No, absolutely.
And why shouldn't you stand next to it when it's starting? Because it's loud. It's
Hmm.
things like that.
That
So
reminds me, when obviously, when I started my career, I was working with the CIA's Energy Management Cell, and we had to go to a factory to do an energy audit. And I
yes,
was in that energy audit, I was just a team member, and I had a team leader. So my team leader on the first morning gave me a power meter and said, "Now go and measure all the motors." And I had no idea of how to measure the power consumption
yeah,
of the motors, because you learn some of those things at a theoretical level in the lab, but in real
yes,
life, you know, to go and where to put the clamp for the voltage and where to put the two probes on which two phases, you learn
yeah,
actually on the ground.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
the technician who was taking me around, and he saw me getting puzzled in terms of, I was struggling how to go about doing it, and he very helpfully offered that, shall I turn the pump off and then you measure? He was so kind to me, and I looked at him with a nonplussed look. But then I eventually you figure out on your own. But the good thing is that at least you're thrown in the field, and you
Yes.
learn things. Okay, so
And
that was
actually,
to the
I
hotel with you.
actually people thought I was a pest, because I used to be asking questions, right? Everything
Yeah.
I knew, right? I mean, I
Correct,
knew a
correct.
little bit about cars, but I
Mm,
didn't know anything about an air handler or a chiller
mm.
or a refrigerant circuit or a fan coil
Yeah,
unit or a motorized valve or a solenoid valve, and everything it looked different, functioned differently, and it was a five-star hotel, so it had everything I needed to know about building services. It
mm,
was there: cooling towers, float valves, ball
right.
valves. It was like acquiring at that time a whole set of encyclopedias.
So is
And then
this
the
on?
next year, that was 72. I was at Colombo Intercontinental Hotel. And then the next year, I worked at the Colombo Oberoi Hotel, which was at that time a 250 bedroom
Right,
hotel, right? Which is still
right,
there. It's called the Cinnamon Grand Hotel in Sri Lanka. And the next year, so three years out of the 2 years, 6 months or 5 months, I was working as a vacation trainee, and that set my tone and my what shall I say, the foundation
mm,
in building services, because both jobs were
right,
electrical,
right,
mechanical, a little bit of civil, waterproofing, and concrete, a little bit of that. And I
correct.
was the 2 years I worked there.
So obviously, I can sense there was a transition in you as a person from when you shifted from theoretical education to practical, where
Yes,
you became more serious when things started, becoming real for you, where you could touch things, things became tangible
touch things,
rather
see
than textbook.
things. And I'm very grateful to again my father. My father used to know people in these companies. So I just give me a note and I used to go and get into these companies without interviews. But then that was an opportunity which I grabbed, okay?
Yeah.
And I learned a lot in those 6 months about the practical part of hydraulics and electrical. I was a little bit scared about electricity, but that was but not much. I didn't do much on electrical till I came to Dubai, and then I graduated after doing implant training at the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. I graduated.
So what happened after this 3 years? Did you continue your studies or did you start
No,
working?
after 3 years, I fell in love. At that time, I fell in love with my wife and my girlfriend at that
Okay.
time, and decided to get married. Right. And I
Okay.
thought education, at that time, I thought education was enough. And my wife used to earn a little bit more money than I was.
Okay.
And I was working for, my first real job was with Bata Shoe Company.
Oh,
You
Bata
know
Shoe
Bata,
Company.
yeah, Bata. So
Yeah, of course.
I visited your hometown of Bata Naga in
Okay.
1975, I think. I went to Bata Naga and I was for training, and I was
Okay.
working for Bata for 2 years as a management trainee in engineering
Oh,
and sewing. I used to sew shoes and all that at Bata. Okay,
okay.
uh,
So
yeah.
those were all
So
you were doing it by hand or there were machines for doing that?
there were sewing machines, and believe it or not, while we are fascinated by spacecraft and
Oh,
computers and Apple phones, the sewing machine is one of the most advanced machines in the world, right? That
okay.
needle goes up and down,
Yeah.
3,000 times a minute, So there was my management training at Bata's. I had to work in sewing, I had to work with boilers, I had to work with, molding machines. And then
Okay.
finally, I ended up in engineering as a maintenance engineer.
Okay.
And I was trained in engineering work in India, Singapore, Bangkok, Malaysia, Jakarta, right? So I went to those countries and saw the way these things are done. Part of my training at that time.
Hmm. So you actually build shoes with your hands?
No, I was very bad at that, but the shoes are built, Bata. I mean, they make shoes which I mean, the simpler shoe is the chappal, which is a
Yeah.
rubber shoe that is very simple. It's cut from a
Yeah.
rubber sheet and it's inserted.
Correct.
But other shoes are stitched. You stitch the
Yes.
top part of it, and there's a process called lasting. There's a process called molding, and it's stitched, and the
Mhm.
shoes are cut in a normal shoe is probably cut in about 10 pieces, stitched together, lasted, and then vulcanized or pressed
Right.
uh,
Right. Right.
together. So it's a mass production scheme, and at the end of the conveyor belt you get a shoe coming out, right? And
Right.
the quality control, temperatures, pressures, all those things we learned in university were markers in the industry. Tensile
Right.
strength. If you take a piece of material, the material is test for tensile strength,
Yes. Yes.
tearing strength, all these things, warp and weft, and so many things. So many things were there. So again, Bata was an international company, so I was able to, and the most important thing at Bata's was discipline. Okay.
Yes.
Now I came to as a management trainee. They disciplined me. No mama's boy, no dada's favorite. Yeah, the four-letter words were introduced into my vocabulary.
Right.
Uh, and you idiot, just because you went to university, don't think that you know everything. They didn't get me to scrub the floors, but almost there. Okay, almost there. So carry ladders, run around, and no excuses. At Bata, you recall that I used to be a tough guy to work with. There were
Yes.
no excuses in my
Who can forget that?
yeah, absolutely. And that was thanks to Bata. They taught me, don't come with excuses that you have a headache or that you
Right.
you tore your trouser or something like that. Actually, it was funny because end of the day I used to be almost in tears, but it molded us to say to perform, right? Forget the engineering part of it, but in the latter years of our life, when we came to doing green buildings, you know how tough
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is,
yeah.
right? When you go in front of a client, uh, all that grounding came from Bata, and then a little later I'll tell you who were the other people who taught us discipline.
Right,
Okay.
right, right. So 2 years of Bata, and then what happened?
Then you remember I told you I worked at Intercontinental, right?
Yes, yes.
And one of my superiors, a guy was about 4 or 5 years older than me, he left Colombo Intercontinental and came to Dubai to do the Dubai Intercontinental.
Okay,
Okay. And then at that time, when the Dubai Intercontinental was finished, which pretty much Dubai Intercontinental looked pretty much like the Colombo Intercontinental layout wise, not the
this is the
architecture.
Intercontinental on the Dubai Creek, right?
Yes, 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 yes,
Yes.
yes. So he came there as an engineer,
Okay,
working for Bechtel Corporation.
okay.
Because Bechtel were the consultants in Colombo as well as in Dubai.
Right, right.
And then he was starting up a company with Thermo, right? You know the company we work for, Serviu
Yes,
and
yes.
Thermo. So the owner of Thermo, or the founder of Thermo, was building a company in 1978 or so, right? Or
Mm.
78 or so, somewhere around that, 77, I would say. He was starting Thermoelectric Services, and he partnered with this guy who was my boss in Sri Lanka,
Okay,
and they started Thermo, and they were looking for engineers who had
right.
hotel experience.
Okay. Why
So now
specifically hotel experience?
sorry?
Why specifically hotel experience?
Because they were working. They had finished the Colombo. They they had experience in building hotels, the MEP services in
Okay,
hotels, and they thought that was a good industry to get into. So they set up this company called Thermoelectric Services in 1976 or 77, right? And
right.
they were looking for engineers. So I got the opportunity of coming to Dubai as a electrical engineer, because that was the
Oh,
only
wow.
position which was open, right, at that time. Not a mechanical engineer, as the electrical engineer. So from Bata Shoe Company, I left and came to Dubai on April 1st, 1977, to work on the Grand Metropolitan Hotel in Dubai.
That's the one opposite Safa Park on the second interchange.
Yeah, but the one which is currently is a real grand one. It's a huge construction.
No, I'm
The
talking the
one
old one, the previous one.
the old one was, they are opposite your office in Safa Park.
Yes,
That was a 200-bedroom hotel called the
mm.
Grand Metropolitan Hotel.
Yes.
Yeah, so that hotel, right, as the electrical
Oh,
engineer.
that was your first project.
That was my first project in Dubai. Okay.
Okay.
And I was my job was to, as I mentioned, my title was electrical engineer, and I used to my job was to pull cables and terminate and do the electrical installations. Right, there was a consultant on board called Upton Associates, and we had no design role. Ours was an installation role. So
Right.
it was to know the IE installation code and go ahead and install, right? Okay.
But that was that complex, not only a hotel, but it was also a residential complex, and then there was the movie
Not when we
hall.
started. Not when we started. There was a small residential complex for the staff, very
Right.
small. And then after that, there was a equestrian facility behind it
Correct. Correct.
at one stage, long time ago. But it was mainly a 200-bedroom hotel, and it had the famous pub called the Red Lions Pub, which is still there on
Yes.
Shakeside Road. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It was a very heritage building, and I remember going there to watch movies because we were living opposite, right? So it was very one of the closest movie theaters for us
It had
indoors at
a
that
big
time.
ballroom. It had a discotheque called Lucifer's.
Right.
So it was an interesting project for me. And the project manager, who was mechanical, he left the project
Hmm.
halfway to, and then I took over the role as project manager for that hotel
Okay. So
for
that's
as
how you.
MEP.
Right. I just want to take a step back because I saw something interesting that this award that you had at the university, Professor Mohan Munasinghe Award for Outstanding Contribution to the Cause of Energy
Yes.
Conservation. Tell us a little bit about that award.
So that happened a couple of years later. So from Dubai, uh, after doing the hotels, I went to I at that time I felt that I didn't have adequate academic experience or academic knowledge or the academic confidence. I think that's a better word. The theoretical confidence. And I was married at that time. I had two children and decided to stop everything in Dubai and go to the US to study.
Okay.
Uh, and my boss, who was at Thermo, he had studied at, or the owner of Thermo had studied in the US and highly recommended that I go to US to study. And it was
This was Mr.
fairly,
Rafa, right?
Mr. Rafa, yes, that's right.
Yes.
I still keep in touch with him.
Oh,
Uh, his birthday was on the 6th of November. I called him and wished him.
is he
One of
still
my
in Dubai?
mentors. Huh?
Is he still in Dubai?
Yeah, he called me from a Dubai now. When I called him, I couldn't get through to him. Later, he called me from a Dubai number. Uh,
Okay.
so, so I presume he's in Dubai. And he recommended also that I go to the US to study. And
Hmm.
I left Dubai in 1980, December,
Hmm.
and went to the US to study.
Okay.
And then I finished my bachelor's and master's there and came back and I worked at Bata's for 1 year, my earlier place.
In
And then
Colombo.
I joined Oberoi as a chief engineer in 1984. Okay.
Okay. So Dubai was a
So
temporary stint at that time for you.
yeah, 3 years in Dubai. And then I joined, so university, Bata, Dubai, USA, back to Colombo,
Right.
Bata, and then I joined Lanka
Enterprise.
Oberoi as a chief engineer. And
Oberoi.
Oberoi, and Mr. Oberoi, he died recently. He was one of the most ambitious and most demanding Indian businessmen, and he was also a no-nonsense boss at that time.
Okay.
Right? We used to call him the short terror because
Short.
short terror. He was short,
Okay.
and he was a terror. Nice guy, but no nonsense. Okay, so for
Hmm.
all those budding engineers and accountants and all that who come up with 100 excuses,
Hmm.
if you ever have a tough boss, that is the best education you can get. So
Absolutely.
Mr. Oberoi is a tough guy, really tough, and he was very knowledgeable. Let it be how to do a steak, of how to start a centrifugal chiller, how to fire a boiler. He knew everything. And I'm
Wow.
not talking, I mean, he would know what is the chill water leaving temperature by touching the surface of the table, right? So
Wow.
that was the knowledge, and I really appreciated working for him.
Yeah.
And one of the problems at the Oberoi was it was a 600 bedroom hotel at that time. You remember when I worked for it in 1974, 73, it was 250 bedrooms. By this time, tourism had improved in Sri Lanka, and it
Right.
became a 600 bedroom large hotel, beautiful hotel. Skid Boeings and Merrill were the consultants on that project, SOM. Which is built people who also again one of the biggest consultants in the world. SOM, they were biggest sustainability consultants in the world, and they were the consultants on this hotel, and energy was a big problem at that time. So this is where I got involved with energy in a serious manner. Because energy costs at the Oberoi were more than 30% of the revenue.
More than 30% of the revenue.
Absolutely, absolutely, right?
That's very
Because
high.
at that time, Sri Lanka had a very high energy tariff, as well as something called a luxury tax, and also a tourism tax, right?
Okay.
Any hotel had to pay both a luxury tax as well as this tourism thing, and it is to eat into the operating budget of the hotel. So Mr.
Right.
Oberoi, when I was hired, asked me, "Do I know energy management?" And of course, I said I know energy management, and there I started doing energy management the way you and I used to do it at or you still do it in Dubai, of having a really a scientific approach. I mean, turning lights off and shutting down equipment. That is, what shall I say, a pragmatic approach. It's fairly straightforward, right? It's a human part of that exercise that has to be
Right.
handled. But here we had companies come and measure enthalpy and entropy, and I still have those energy management reports. I think I have those energy management reports, and we outsourced it, and we were able to cut back on what you call in a hotel HLP, heat, light, and power. We were able to cut back on HLP by more than 15%, I would say.
Right.
And it's not easy to do that in a badly constructed environment, right? So if you have water leaks and chillers tripping and starting, and so you need to get the engineering right, and before you do the energy management and the fine tuning, right?
Right.
And at that time, we won that award. It was a national award by Professor Mohan Munasinghe, who is still living and who is still he was a United Nations expert on energy. Oberoi got the award for the national award for energy conservation.
Okay.
So
that was for a
that was, you could say, a serious achievement in my career of showing performance, not just talking about something, but showing performance, right? Very similar to getting a LEED certificate or something.
Absolutely.
Because it was on data, real time data, and it was monitored by the Ceylon Electricity Board, who is the big army of engineers there, and we had real time data measurements, calculations, payback periods, and all that.
But
And
we are still talking of an era where did you have automation at that time in the hotel?
I still remember one of these recommendations of the team was to you have a Honeywell control system.
Okay.
Right, for the hotel, right? We didn't have a automated system. We had the normal regular thermostat, mechanical thermostat starting switching on-off motor as well. We had a boiler. We had to replace the boiler to get the flue gas temperatures right, and so on. So it was everything, and in energy management, from chill water to boilers to pumps to lighting. There was no LED lighting at that time. It was incandescent lighting, but the aesthetic lighting, we turned it down from, let's say, 60 watt to 15 watt.
Right.
One of the biggest problems we had at that time, and you laugh at this, the bedside. These are 600 bedrooms,
Right.
so you can imagine the amount of incandescent lights which were there.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
And because the guests couldn't read, they
Mm.
would call the housekeeping and say, "I cannot read." And the
Mm.
housekeeping lady used to come and remove the 40-watt lamp, which was the standard wattage,
Yeah.
and put a 100-watt lamp. So you can imagine a
Mm.
600 bedroom hotel. How do you know how many 100-watt lamps are there and how many 60-watt lamps are there? And then training the staff not to do that. And the guest and the engineering staff would say, "Sorry, we are not changing the lamps." And the guest would give the housekeeping boy or
Mm.
the girl 100 rupees and say, "Now change my bulb," and she would go and get a 100-watt bulb and put it there so that he can read.
Right. 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 So
So
that's a lot of
again,
kilowatts. Yeah.
that's a lot of kilowatts. And then how do you track it, right? How do you track it,
Yeah.
So it was not only a technology, it was training the staff of how to do that. And we had a staff of around about probably 500 people.
Mm.
Engineering had 120 odd people, but the housekeeping and laundry and all that. So how do you train 500 people?